This episode of the Baddest Ballers Podcast is brought to you by Spaceship Apparel. Gear so fresh, it's out of this world. SpaceshipApparel.com. All right, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Baddest Ballers Podcast. I have a special guest by the name of Imman. But so before I get started, I'm just going to let you do a quick intro of yourself and a little background.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Imman, like you said, and I am one of the hosts of Dishes and Dimes, which is an all-women's Raptors podcast. We're 8 women, so it's a pretty big show. We rotate hosts, and we get Raptors and basketball news on a weekly podcast.
Oh, awesome. So I actually have listened to a bit of that podcast, and I thought just even the premise of it was interesting. Were you part of the brainchild for that podcast, or you just kind of hop on later? I was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it was initially, the idea started with Sandy, and it honestly had to do with there are a lot of different basketball podcasts, right? There are tons of them, and there are a lot of different Raptor ones, but we found that there weren't a lot of women ones. And I think Sandy just was like, we should all just start one. And that was just something that was said on the timeline. And then a bunch of women who were like, I'd be down to start one, kind of got together, and that's how it was all created.
Are there really a lot of Raptors podcasts?
There's so many. There are so many Raptor podcasts.
Seriously, I really would have never guessed. I'm not even trying to be funny.
No. The reason for it is a lot of the Raptors community actually exists online, and part of that is because Canada is so hockey focused that of course, like ESPN and American networks don't really focus on the Canadian team because our viewership doesn't count towards the ratings. So you're thinking about a market like Toronto would be the third largest city in America behind Toronto and New York. Behind New York and Los Angeles, right? So that's it's a giant market, but our media on TV and in radio focuses on hockey. So because the American media doesn't focus on the Raptors, and then the Canadian media focuses on hockey, the internet is really where basketball fans came in. And you have to think about the Raptors are a really young team, only came in '95. So all of us kind of grew up with the Raptors, and we're sort of the first generation of diehard Raptor fans. That's why we all kind of exist online.
That's interesting. So did you personally start paying attention to basketball from the inception of the Raptors franchise, or were you an NBA fan before that?
I wasn't alive before that, so. So yeah, the Raptors were my introduction to basketball, and it was really.
So wise,
well, thank you. The Raptors were my introduction to basketball, so it was definitely the Vince Carter years.
Gotcha.
I was probably about 6 or so, and I think if you even look around the league, a lot of the Canadian basketball players happen to be, born in the mid-'90s, and grew up on Vince Carter, and that's kind of
right.
That's where all the basketball fans exist in Canada.
I think if your introduction to basketball is Vince Carter, that's kind of getting spoiled right off the bat,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, but then it's nice for a couple of years, and then it's just pain for the next decade.
Very true. Also very, very true.
It's been a painful existence as a Raptors fan.
So did you have a favorite player after Carter's departure from the Raptors, or did you still just sort of remain a Carter fan and a Raptors fan?
Oh no. Most Raptor fans, as a 10-year-old, I despised Vince Carter.
Oh, really?
I existed to I would go to Nets games specifically to boo Vince Carter. That was my sole purpose
My
in
goodness.
as a 10-year-old. And then I grow up and I'm working conditions suck. I'm not supporting the corporation in any of this. Your politics change as you grow up and you start to look at the world differently. But definitely as a 10-year-old kid, I hated Vince Carter. And this is really embarrassing as a Raptors fan to say, but my favorite player was I had a couple, you always have Steve Nash as a Canadian is always going to be one of your favorite players. But Paul Pierce is probably one that I get killed on the most about. Paul Pierce is one of my favorite players. It was Pierce, it's Iverson, and Nash. Yeah.
Probably. I've never heard anyone say
there you go. That's what everybody says. It was Pierce, it was Nash, and it was Iverson.
Nash makes a lot of sense, and Iverson makes a lot of sense. Iverson's an icon. Explain the Paul Pierce to me, though.
I was 7. Like beyond that, but I'll still defend Paul Pierce. I think he's one of the most sort of underrated. Like I kind of tweeted the other day, and I got killed for it, where I was like, Paul Pierce just wants the love that Melo's getting right now. That's all he wants in life. And it's like, I definitely think that Paul Pierce is one of the more underrated players, but I'm not going to defend him. As a Raptor fan, I kind of feel like I shouldn't. He's a sworn enemy of Raptor Nation.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm just a little surprised that you said that he was ever your favorite player. I don't know that I can
I got killed on the first episode of Dishes and Dimes, where everyone was like, what? And I was like, you guys know this. Like, if you followed my Twitter in 2008, or not 2008, 2010, I guess, I was very upset at the Los Angeles Lakers for taking that championship. I think belonged to the Celtics.
So, did you sort of after the Cartiers sort of fall off a little bit as a Raptors fan, or were you like straight up diehard?
I was a diehard. Like my life really did revolve around the Raptors. I was a diehard Raptor fan, and I was watching, like, they were not winning games. Like, these are like 30, 20 win teams. These were like just some of the worst basketball. Actually, looking back, it's like I don't know how anyone would be a diehard fan of that team. Like, I can't imagine it. But yeah, no, I was a diehard fan for all of those brutal years.
So I asked your colleague Katie this, so I'm going to ask you as well.
Okay.
How did you feel about the DeRozan Kawhi trade?
Oh my gosh, that was so that day actually was really funny because I had slept over my friend's house and my phone died. No one in the house had an iPhone charger, so I didn't have a phone. And I woke up and I just felt like Googling Kawhi Leonard's name for absolutely no reason besides the fact that I'm a crazy person and I knew his name was incredible. Like being like, just like I knew that there were rumors and it seemed so far-fetched. I Googled it and I was like, wait, what? And I like grabbed my friend's phone and I was like, I need to be on Twitter. I need to find out what's happening. And I was so happy. So I've never been the biggest DeMar DeRozan supporter. Love DeMar. Boom. I love him from afar. He's, oh my goodness. I love him in San Antonio. I think that's great for him. I was over the moon. It was the greatest thing ever. And I was like, even if it's a 1-year rental, this is what the team needs. And it turned out to be what the team needed. So.
Bizarre. I mean, yes, obviously. I'm starting to be less convinced that you're actually a Raptors fan. What was your issue with DeRozan?
Have you watched the Raptors in the playoffs?
I have, yes.
Yeah, that's my issue with DeRozan. No, but in all honesty, with that sounds kind of mean, but it was coming off of the 2018 playoffs, which, if you remember, that was a year where the Raptors were actually like a really good team in the regular season, and a lot of what ailed them previously had kind of changed. The way that they played offense kind of changed. It was a more motion style offense. It felt more modern. The ball moved around more. It was less sort of ISO, and it just kind of fit a more modern style of basketball, and their offensive rating was through the roof, and they were actually a serviceable defensive team. And so they finished with a great record. You went into the playoffs thinking this is going to be the year that you beat LeBron James. This is going to be the year that you get past the Cavs. And the Cavs were bad. Like, the Cavs needed 7 games to get past, the Victor Oladipo Indiana Pacers team, which I think is a little bit overrated just because they took the Cavs so far. And the same thing with the Boston Celtics team. Like, the Cavs needed 7 games to get by anyone in the East, but then swept the Raptors. And they swept the Raptors with DeMar DeRozan being benched. And DeMar DeRozan didn't close out the last 2 games of that series. He got ejected in one and got benched in the other. Or not ejected, I think he fouled out something. And it was just like a brutal way to end. But I think a lot of that moment, that sweep that happened at the hands of a bad Cavs team was kind of where I was like, I'm done with DeMar DeRozan. I don't know that I'm ever going to believe that this team is going to accomplish anything in the playoffs if he's still on this team. I was like, they need to get rid of Dwayne Casey. They need to get rid of DeMar DeRozan. That's a lie. I wasn't so sold on the Dwayne Casey part. I was more so sold on DeMar DeRozan needs to be gone if this team is going to amount to anything. And so I had just been on that all summer. So when the Kawhi Leonard trade happened, I was like, thankfully, DeMar DeRozan is gone and this team can actually do something in the playoffs, which sounds so mean. I'm so sorry, DeMar, but it needed to happen. It needed to happen. He's just, I think he's a good player. And I think that he's kind of underrated on sort of the Twitter sphere for what he does well. But I think the issue with him is, for one, he's a complete – if you look at what the Raptors team is right now, the Raptors have 5 great defenders on at all times. Like, they start with 5 great defenders, 1 through 5. There's no one that you can attack. They are all NBA, like all defensive NBA team, like first and second team level guys. DeMar DeRozan is one of the worst defenders for his position. So that's one thing where he completely gets attacked on the defensive end constantly. Like, he's the one who, it's like Lou Will out there. I don't know if you watched the first half of yesterday's game, but he's very much that Lou Will-esque player, and the Raptors have had Lou Will in the playoffs, so I'm aware of this. And then on the offensive end, DeMar DeRozan can't shoot the 3. So he often gets treated like Tony Allen on the offensive end if the ball isn't in his hands. But he brings none of what Tony Allen brings on the defensive end. So he's getting treated like Lou Will on the defensive end, and then Tony Allen on the offensive end, the ball's not in his hands. And so he does become just this major liability unless you take the ball and put it in his hands. And that's taking it out of Kyle Lowry's hands, who I think the ball should be in, as the point guard and the best playmaker on the team. So to me, it was just like you're just – the team ceiling just completely drops with a guy like DeMar DeRozan, and that's why I thought he needed to go, and it proved to be correct. So yeah, I was all on board with the Kawhi Leonard trade. I'm not sure what Katie said, but I loved it.
She was a bit more broken up about it than you.
Oh God, I was ready to throw a parade.
I mean, to be fair to something that you said, DeMar is definitely a much better jump shooter than Tony Allen. I don't know that's such a flattering comparison.
I'm saying, okay, it's fair. I'm just saying they ignored him in the same way. If you remember, kind of the defensive strategy against the Memphis Grizzlies was, if the ball is not in Tony Allen's hands, we're going to ignore him because he cannot space the floor. And so the floor just completely shrinks. He is a much better shooter than Tony Allen. And if the ball is in DeMar's hands, I think he's a much better playmaker than people give him credit for. I think he's a much better ball handler than people give him credit for. And I think he's one of the best and most elite scorers, and his footwork is absolutely insane. I think DeMar DeRozan is a great player. I just think I just think he takes a lot from your team in the playoffs. In the regular season, love the guy. In the playoffs, he puts a ceiling on your team.
Oh no, for sure, absolutely. He definitely it was clear to everyone that there was a hard ceiling on that Raptors team with DeRozan, and you never ever pass any opportunity to get a player like Kawhi. That's just like a given. But so after you guys got Kawhi, though, there was a strong feeling, that was most likely going to be a 1-year rental. Did you ever have hope that he was going to stay with Toronto?
Yes, which is like why it was so heartbreaking. For most of the year, I didn't, and I was fine with that because it was like, here's the thing, I talked about the Celtics earlier on in that Paul Pierce, KG, that team, they won 1 championship and they were together for a few years, right? So there are so many great dynasties that don't even win a champion. Well, I guess they're not dynasties if they're not winning championships, but you know what I mean? There are like a lot of great teams that don't even get there. So to me, it was like, you're giving your team a chance to get a title. You would never have that opportunity with DeMar DeRozan as your star player. You're getting that now with Kawhi. You do it. And even if it's just for 1 year, hopefully everything breaks right, and that's what happened with the Raptors. But so I was all on board with the trade, but then there was a point where I did start to believe it, and that was in the playoffs. It took until the playoffs happened. It would have been I think I started to believe it in the conference finals, but definitely during the parade. Like, I don't know if you know this, but Uncle Dennis, who terrorized San Antonio Spurs fans, he at the parade, when the fans were chanting 1 more year at Kawhi, he started a chant saying 5 more years. And it's like, why are you taunting us? Like, what are you doing? Like, looking back at it now, it's like, why would you do that to us? So Kawhi, had his whole hand up. Like, Kawhi was chanting 1 more year, and then Kawhi put his whole hand up and did the 5 more year too. And I'm like, what is happening? And then a little kid, like a 10-year-old or something, saw Dennis in the airport and asked, is Kawhi staying? And he was like, you're just going to have to wait and see. But it was, said with, a cheeky smile that kind of made it seem like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I'm like, why are you breaking this child's heart. Like, I don't think that child is never going to trust anyone in his life again. Like, it's so heartbreaking. So Dennis is a super villain, and I love it. Like, I'm not saying it as someone who hates him. Like, I just think it's absolutely hilarious that entire summer how he was just like 5 more years and like wink wink nudge nudge to the little kid who is probably scarred right now. So thoughts and prayers.
Right. I think it was part of this huge master plan to absolutely keep everyone off track for what his next move was. Because I distinctly remember Jalen Rose, Mr. 99%, in his prediction on Kawhi. But speaking of the Raptors and they run a lot of motion stuff on offense, and they play defense very cohesively.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the notion that those players are like largely system players? They wouldn't necessarily excel in other schemes.
What I would say to that is, and this is kind of something that I've been talking a lot about, and I think there's a lot of an underrating of Kyle Lowry. As someone who's not a huge fan of DeMar DeRozan, you can assume that I'd be a big fan of Kyle Lowry. And the Raptors have been a 50-plus win team for the last 5 years. They've been a 48-win team for the last 7 years. So in all of Kyle Lowry's years where he's been the starter for the team and there hasn't been sort of anything else, any year that Kyle Lowry's been here and has been our starter, the team has been a 48-plus win team. So 48, 49, and then 50, 59, 56, this year, 60-win pace. So they've been this elite team. I'm not talking like mid-40s. I'm saying 50-win team. And that's through different coaches, and that's through different players. That's through offensive-minded team with like Gravis Vasquez and Lou Will and just multiple point guards that can handle the ball and do everything. They've been it through defensive teams. They've been it through every iteration. I'm talking the last 7 years. They have been a consistently they finish with a top 4 record in the East, usually top 2 record in the East. And that's through different coaches. That's through different rosters. That's through different everything. The one constant that entire time has been Kyle Lowry. So when people talk about the Raptors sort of playing outside their head or playing within a system or giving credit to Nick Nurse, I think that discredits all of what happened prior to Nick Nurse's arrival, prior to whatever other players helped make the system's arrival, and discredits Kyle Lowry, who's been the engine, has been the most important player every single year, except for last year. Kyle Lowry's done what this team needs him to do. If they need him to be that 20, 30-point scorer, he averaged 20 this year because they needed it from him, he'll do that. If they need him to take a backseat to Kawhi Leonard and Pascal Siakam and just be the primary facilitator and an excellent defender, he'll be that. And so I just think when people say that, to me, it's like you're not watching the Raptors and you're not paying attention to how great Kyle Lowry's been. He's been, if I look at any other team and you say they've been a 50-win team for the last 5 or 6 years, their best player, their most important player would be talked about in such high regard and such high category, and that doesn't happen for Kyle Lowry. And I think it's because his game is a little less flashy, and I think it's because he plays in a market outside of America. But he's been phenomenal every single year, and he's the reason why the Raptors excel.
Oh, absolutely. And I agree. I definitely think he's underrated. And I think part of the problem with that is that people sometimes forget, I think, that more than one thing can be true. A player can be in a good system and also still be a really good player. And I think that's sort of what's happening in Toronto right now. A lot of those guys are actually being utilized correctly and being put in positions to succeed on the court. Doesn't mean that they couldn't do well, Kyle Lowry especially. Otherwise, the only player on that team that I question actually is VanVleet. He's quick, and he definitely has a high basketball IQ. Knows how to use his body on the court. But it's definitely difficult for undersized guards in the league. Yeah. And what are your thoughts about VanVleet, dude?
So, I think it ranges so high with VanVleet. And I think there's a little bit of a short-term memory with Fred VanVleet. I don't think people recognize that he was not this good last year. And he's improved dramatically this year. And he's a young player, and young players are going to improve. But I think when people talk about him as just sort of the superstar, I think they're remembering the late playoffs. They're not remembering the Philly series where he was absolutely disastrous. And I think with Fred, I think there's a couple of things there. I don't think that he can be your starting point guard. And if you're looking at him as being your starting point guard, and that's probably what, like, when we talk about the Knicks and the Pistons and all these teams that possibly want to go after him, I think that's the role they're looking at him for. And I'm personally not sure that I'm convinced he can be that guy. Now, he's kind of taken over a lot of the sort of primary ball handling roles because you can play Kyle Lowry on or off ball, and Kyle Lowry kind of just fits in every system. Kyle Lowry is this team system.
Right.
But to me, it's like, yes, we've seen Fred VanVleet do it, but we're seeing him do it next to Kyle Lowry, and we're seeing him do it next to Marc Gasol, who, I mean, if you're doing it alongside those two guys, it's not really like you have the full point guard duty role. So I don't know that he can be a starting point guard. However, I do think he can be a starting shooting guard in the league. And if what you're requiring from him is for him to hit catch and shoot threes, he's absolutely lights out with that. If you want him to, right, like, he used to get every single layup block. Like, it was honestly, like, I would just get secondhand embarrassment sometimes from watching him because it would just be like, what are you doing? But right now in transition, like, he is absolutely unstoppable. You know, it's a bucket every single time. I don't care who the big is on the other end of the court. I don't care who it is. He's quick. He's deceptively quick. I don't know. I don't like it just, and he's so great at, like, just moving with the ball, because it used to just be like, I would just be like, oh, Fred VanVleet has it, dribble, I'm gonna go take a drink of water, I'm gonna go to the bathroom break, and he's still gonna be dribbling when I come back. And that's kind of how it felt with him. But he's improved so much in that regard that I think he can be a starting shooting guard. I think if you're requiring him to be the primary point guard, it's not going to work unless the Raptors get Giannis and they play him alongside Giannis. Perfect fit. I love it. He can be our starting point guard in that situation. So.
Yeah. Do you think that there's even a 1% chance that the Raptors land Giannis?
Oh, have you not heard? The Raptors are getting Giannis in 2021. So I'm not sure if you know this, but Giannis has a great relationship with Masai Ujiri. His family has a great relationship with Masai Ujiri. This was reported in a Toronto newspaper, I think Toronto Star, if I'm not mistaken, where when Giannis was leaving Greece, because he, of course, was not a Greek citizen, despite being born there because of the way that, laws work.
Right.
So when he was leaving for America, he needed Greek citizenship to get the passport in order to come over. And it's been rumored that Masai Ujiri was actually the person to facilitate that. And make sure that his family had that in order to come over here. So they have a long-standing relationship. Like I said, I don't know how, like, those are the rumors that are out and about. We know that Masai does have a relationship with his family. Giannis has worked with Giants of Africa with Masai Ujiri and all of that, so they have some sort of background, at least their families do. So we're holding on to Uncle Masai coming through with the, jollof rice and the fufu and just making it a Nigerian party here in Toronto.
I genuinely hope that you're wrong.
What? Why? That's the most offensive thing I've ever heard.
I am a Lakers fan, and although I know that,
yeah, you guys have AD and LeBron, you're like, oh yeah, no,
right,
Listen,
exactly. No, yeah.
If you can't get it
We're
done
not getting Giannis, but
with AD and LeBron, I don't want to hear anything. Okay, you guys don't need another superstar. What you guys need are role players. Okay. See, here's my thing about the Lakers, and I have to ask you about this because I've said that I would be disappointed if I were a Lakers fan because the Raptors have been great for the last 6 years. Fantastic. The Lakers have been garbage for the last few years. Look up and down the Raptors roster. The reason why they're so good right now, and the reason why, like, last year was the only year that a team has ever won a championship without a lottery pick. And granted, Kawhi is amazing, but the Raptors are still a 60-plus win team without Kawhi here. So it's still like the rest of the team is also really great. And part of that is because of the Raptors' development of these young players. The Raptors actually cared about their young players and tried to develop their young players, and they didn't have any lottery picks. They didn't have any lottery picks during that time. They'd won Jakob Poeltl, which is now in San Antonio, but outside of Jakob Poeltl, they had no lottery picks. These were undrafted guys. These are second-round picks, and the Lakers have all these top picks. After Julius Randle, it's like top pick, and Julius Randle was a top pick. They don't have anyone. Like, Kyle Kuzma's like, okay, he's not great. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's what you have. Like, you've been bad for that long, and you guys could not foster decent role players around this guy. You need to call J.R. Smith out of retirement. You need to call Dion Waiters, who got away from being high on a flight. Like, that's who you have as your role players. I'd be disappointed. I'd be so disappointed.
If you're trying to make me cry, you're very close to no, it's almost, you are 1,000% right, and it's so embarrassing because it's like the Lakers. It's like the Lakers organization they sit down and they try to figure out, okay, what would be the best move? Now let's do not that. It blows my mind. They develop no one. And they're somehow always in win now mode while constantly losing. Yeah. So it's the worst of both worlds somehow. And I never understand.
Which is like the opposite of the Raptors, who are in win now mode, are winning, but are also in player development mode. Like these guys, like while they made the conference finals and won 59 games, that's when that's when Norman Powell was a rookie. The next year is when they got Fred VanVleet. Like all of these young players that you're looking at, you're like, you got that while being a conference finals team and developed them into being contenders and like being contributors on a championship winning team. It's amazing. The Raptors are the antithesis of the Lakers, which normally would sound like a terrible thing to say, but for right now, yeah.
Well, to be fair, The Lakers, they're such a big market team that they pretty much just rely on star power. They're like, okay, we're going to wait till we get like the biggest name in the league. And then, hopefully we can get like another huge name.
I understand that.
Like
I
literally
understand
through
that,
their entire history.
You need role players. I know that, but like you need role players. And that's my thing. It's like, you're the Lakers. That's the Lake Show. You are going to get LeBron James. You're going to get Anthony Davis. You're going to get whatever superstar comes after LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They're going to want to go there. Superstars, as we've seen, need role players to play with. When you're bad for 6 years, why are you not paying attention? Why are you not developing the Lonzo Balls, the Brandon Ingrams, the Julius Randles, the Kyle Kuzmas, the Josh Hart? Like, why aren't you developing these guys? Why are you looking at them solely as trade bait? And yes, you know what? Trade them away. But at least if the Lakers had spent those 6 years trying to develop a good team, as opposed to just like, we need pick after pick after pick so we can trade them in a package. If they'd actually spent time doing that, they probably would not need to be paying KCP whatever they're paying him and like relying on J.R. Smith out of retirement and JaVale. Like they would just have better guys right now and would just be a much better team. And so it was unfortunate. Also unfortunate is the fact that like Danny Green was really great for the Raptors last year and now looks like the guy that
Don't remind me because I was actually semi-excited. I was like, okay, he's a decent role player. Like he's going to be able to.
He was great last year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I figured in worst case scenario, he takes a half step back. He's still going to be pretty good for the Lakers. No, not really. So I don't know if the Lakers are just currently cursed or whatever the case is, but it's
not cursing. It's just bad management. It's what it is. It's like
cursed with bad management, maybe.
I mean, okay, maybe we could talk about it being a new era. Sure, let's hope. But also, I don't know. J.R. Smith was the latest addition, so.
I mean, there were slim pickings out there, to be fair.
Which has to, once again, do with terrible management.
Also very true.
Laker fans are going to kill me.
You're going to get so much stuff on Twitter. Now, you're the Raptors GM. Mm-hmm. Are you making any moves for next year? Any splashes?
Am I making any moves for next? No, I think the Raptors do want to keep their flexibility open. I don't see it like you look at the free agent market. Like what is a splash to make? Who are you going after? I think what the Raptors are probably going to do is going to be to try and keep their free agents. Fred VanVleet's going to be a free agent. I think the Raptors are going to try and keep him. Marc Gasol is going to be a free agent, and Serge Ibaka is going to be a free agent. And I think I think the Raptors are probably going to try to keep one of the two. And I think Marc Gasol is definitely more important to this team. So I think your goal is to try to keep Fred VanVleet and Marc Gasol. Your 60-win pace this year, second best record in the league, better than the Lakers. So
that's right in there.
Yeah, I had to add that in. So I don't think there's a reason to really sort of mess with it at all. The Raptors do want to keep flexibility open. They're definitely going to go after Giannis, but regardless of what you think their chances are, they're definitely going to try and do it. And so flexibility's got to stay open. And also, this is not a free agent class where you're trying to make a move. And Masai Ujiri has never been the type to make a big splash just to make a big splash. It's very methodical in making the move when it makes sense. And there's nothing this year. So just keeping your guys.
So do you think that your Raptors actually have a decent chance to win it all this year?
Well, the Bucks just lost to the Magic, so
I was going to bring that up. I didn't actually get to watch that game, but I was going to ask you about that actually. Do you think? Did you get a chance to see that game?
I didn't get it. I was at work. I didn't get a chance to see the game, but I mean, I'm always down for Buck slander. So
I was hoping that you had seen it because I hadn't seen it. I was going to ask if maybe you saw something that would have indicated that maybe it's a fluke or you think there's something going on.
I don't know if it's a fluke. Like I've definitely sort of just like been reading my timeline and I actually listened to a Bucks podcast just to see what they had to say to get a feel. And it kind of it feels like, well, Giannis had a great game. And then their role players, quote unquote, all-star Chris Middleton, didn't show up, as we've often seen. But it kind of just feel like no one showed up for the Bucks, which is something that I think it's kind of been happening. The Bucks haven't really been playing all that well in the bubble, which is something that seems overlooked. Everyone's sort of talking about them as, penciling them in for the finals. I don't think that to be true. The Bucks just have not had it this year. They had the game against the Nets where they ended up losing. Everyone talked about the Bucks starters being pulled in the second half, but they were also losing in the first half. And I think the only reason why the Bucks starters were pulled in the second half is because that game got out of hand, and it just you don't want to have your starters in. So everyone kind of talks about it in that way. And actually, right. I was talking to Christian Winfield, who covers the Nets, and he was saying how all the Nets players were like, Giannis was actually working out at halftime. Like, he was gearing up to play. He was pulled as a last minute thing. They were never planning on resting them ahead of time. So the Bucks just have not looked all that great. And also the Magic played with a lot of shooters, and the Bucks leave a lot of, like, they leave that's kind of how that was the Raptors recipe, right? Last year was you have Marcus will help you space the floor, you have VanVleet hit absolutely every single open shot, and it kind of felt like that was happening, and then it also felt like Vooch just absolutely ate. So I think that, the Bucks are still going to win the series and probably are going to win it in 5, but they're showing a lot of holes that I think a Raptors team can really look at. I definitely don't dislike the Raptors' chances in a Bucks series.
The Bucks definitely should have been able to sweep the Magic, so it's a little concerning to me that they would lose one, no less. Yeah. But also, I feel like for some reason, regardless of how well teams were doing going into the bubble, it seems like certain teams are just, I don't know if there's something about the atmosphere of playing in that environment that's affecting certain teams more than other teams. My Lakers, for example, playing terribly in the bubble. They locked up the number 1 seed, but they're barely playing like a playoff team as far as I could tell. Do you think that there is something inherent about that environment that's so drastically different for some of these guys? Because it seems strange to me.
They're also how many 50 some odd points are we getting? It seems like a lot of guys are really getting hot as well. Like, people's shots seem to be falling like crazy in the bubble. Like, TJ Warren has been having a spectacular one.
Yeah, that's
Devin Booker, Damian Lillard. Like, I just feel like there might be something to it. There might be something to like people's shots falling. I don't know. It might be easy. It might just be defenses looking a little suspect with guys' shots falling down. I'm not sure what it is about the bubble. But I also don't think that a bubble should affect a team like the Bucks, who are this historically great team. If you're telling me that it's the bubble that you're not performing well, I don't know about that.
Right? Elite teams should be elite. Period.
They should continue to be elite. I agree with that. Same thing with the Lakers, and part of maybe what's happening with the Lakers, and the game is, I guess, going to happen soon, is that LeBron James might just be taking it easy, right? Like, we've seen what he can do in the playoffs when the games get going. We just saw Jimmy Butler kind of turn it on, being like, oh, it's a playoff game. Yeah, I'm going to start hitting threes, even though I haven't done that all year. I don't know. I don't think it's something that the Bucks or the Lakers should really be worried about, at least in the early rounds. But, when the Bucks start to get to either the Raptors or the Celtics, and then when the Lakers get to the Clippers, I think that's where, if the teams haven't really looked good at that point, that's when people should start to worry.
Now, how do you feel about your Raptors' chances against the Clippers specifically? Should they meet in the finals?
Oh, I'm way more terrified of the Clippers than I am of the Lakers.
Really? Why is that?
Because I think we saw what the Raptors are going to do against the Lakers in that first Raptors game, against the second Lakers game there, and that's they're going to have OG on LeBron. They're going to have Pascal on AD, but they're going to double those guys, and they're going to make sure that the ball gets out of their hands. That was the game plan through the 2 games that the Raptors played against the Lakers, and that was successful in both those games, despite the Raptors not having some pieces in that early game. It was, we are going to force the ball out of those guys' hands, and we're going to force Danny Green to hit a shot. And I don't know if you know this, but Danny Green has scored 0 points against the Raptors this entire year. Through 2 games, he has scored a full 0 points. He's even missing free throws against the Raptors. He's
Why
still
do
a Raptor.
you know this?
Because it's Danny Green. I mean, once you win a championship with a guy, you pay attention to his stats against your team. But he's been absolutely brutal against the Raptors, and honestly, I think the Raptors' game plan is we're going to force the ball out of these guys' hands, and I think the Raptors have the bodies to do that. They actually have guys that can, the Raptors are the best defensive team in the bubble right now, and have been trapping guys really well, and did it very well against Anthony Davis for 2 games in a row now, and force the ball in KCP's hands. We're going to force him to make the shot. And I think the Raptors are comfortable with it being Dion Waiters and KCP hitting the shots as opposed to LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Whereas with the Clippers, I guess to answer the question about the Clippers, I just think the Clippers just have more offensive weapons that I just trust a little bit more. And that's part of why I would be a little bit more worried than with the Lakers role players. But I also like the Lakers in a series against the Clippers. So I just think it's just thinking about the way that the Raptors match up against the Clippers, to me, is a lot scarier, is a lot more worrisome as a Raptors fan than the way that the Raptors match up against the Lakers.
So your personal preference aside, obviously, if you had to pick right now, who would you say is the favorite to win it all?
I don't want it to be the Clippers for obvious reasons. Like, I love Kawhi. I want Kawhi to win a championship. I want Kawhi to lead the Clippers and win a championship. I want Kawhi to win every championship until he retires. I love him so much. I don't want the Clippers to win a championship. And for obvious reasons, I don't want the Bucks to win a championship because I'm holding out hope. I'm doing it. So, to me, I would, of course, want the Raptors and Lakers to be in the finals. That's my dream finals, is Raptors Lakers, and I of course want the Raptors to win it at all. But then if the Raptors don't win it, I would like it for it to be the Lakers.
Okay. No objectivity, but I respect it.
I know. I said this on the Dishes and Dimes pod too, because everyone was talking about Clippers and everyone loves Kawhi here. But I was like, listen, the Lakers have had a tough year, and a championship is not going to bring anyone back. A championship is not going to do anything. But this has been a shitty year, and if something kind of nice can happen, I'm all for that for the Lakers and that entire organization. And also, LeBron James is getting up there in age, and I think that he's the best basketball player, so I'm collect the rings. I'm so great with LeBron James just finishing with 6 rings and that being the end of his career. So, and I know he's got a ways to get up there. So I'm hey, win another championship, just add to the count. I'd be fine with that as well.
Oh yeah, his time is definitely running out, and I definitely think he's gonna decline soonish. If I had to guess.
I don't know about that one. I just feel like LeBron James is never going to decline. I guess probably because he's
really.
He's just and I know that he's declined. I recognize that when watching him this year, it's but I also feel like he just takes time off. I just feel like he does not care. Because if we remember the last finals we've seen, the last playoff game we saw him in, or the last playoff series we saw him in, he had a 50-point triple double near. He was just absolutely dominant in that game where J.R. Smith goofed completely in the final seconds. He just has these absolute dominant performances in the last important games we saw of him, and I think just because he was out of last year's playoffs, we kind of forget that he might still just be the best player in basketball. And I say might because I think Kevin Durant, is up there as well.
Well, I think you could definitely make an argument that LeBron is still the best player in basketball. The decline comes in the sense that the difference between LeBron at 35 and 25 is that at 25, he could be the best player pretty much all the time.
Yeah,
at 35,
for sure.
he has to save it for sometimes.
I don't think he necessarily needs it, right? Like, he doesn't need to be the best player at all times. He's like proven that he's got AD, he's got the young superstar right next to him, and I think, I don't know what the Lakers numbers are. Yes, you would know that better. And I think the Lakers kind of struggle when LeBron sits and it's only AD out there. But I think, when next year, hopefully the Lakers are going to get better pieces to fit around them, and so hopefully they can win one. Hopefully not. Hopefully the Raptors win one. But if the Raptors don't, then hopefully the Lakers win one this year. And then next year they come out with a better team, and LeBron James can rest for most of the regular season and come out in the playoffs and do what LeBron James does best.
One can hope, right?
Not me. I'm not the one hoping this. I'm hoping that the Raptors do it all. But
hoping for this.
I'm sure there are people who are hoping for this. It's just not me.
So who's your bubble MVP?
My bubble MVP. I guess it would have to be Dame. And I don't know if you saw, but there's this meme where it's like this guy like celebrating with like a champagne bath and has like a medal around his neck. And then it gets to the fourth picture and you see that he's like hasn't won gold. He's like the eighth man down. So it's like, how like you have like the guy who wins gold, the person who wins like silver and then bronze. Right. And it's like, you think if you look at the first picture that this is someone who's won gold, but then as the photo zooms out, you realize that no, this is like the eighth place person. And I think that's kind of the celebration that we're having for the Blazers right now. We're treating it like they've done something when it's like, congrats, you made the playoffs. The Orlando Magic did that as well. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that he's but having said that, he's just been absolutely phenomenal in the bubble. It's hard to pick anyone but him.
Did you see their game against the Nets?
I did.
Blazers?
I did.
It was just mind-blowing to me, the defense from Portland. Just I'm positive I could have scored on them. I am absolutely positive if I were out there, I would have scored a few buckets.
Okay, so this is a hot take, I know, to everybody, but my whole thing is like, is the West even that great? And I was watching this Blazers game. And like everybody's talking about this Blazers team, and if they only had Nurkic the entire year, and look how great they are right now. And I'm like, the Nets are bad. Like, we just watched the Raptors absolutely demolish the Nets. The Nets don't really have much going for them. And I'm like, this is a do or die game for the Blazers. The Nets are pulling up guys that no one's heard their names because they were not on NBA rosters before the bubble. And like, this is a do or die, like, must win game. And we need these like heroics from Dame. We need him shooting threes from the logo. Like, we need absolute heroics from him in order for them to put this team away. And I'm like, this is it. This is what you guys are celebrating right now.
And they did not put them away. They barely won.
Barely. And I'm saying, like, that's
barely.
Like, Barely. I'm like, yeah, I definitely think the West is a little bit overrated. Here's my take, and maybe you disagree with it. I think the top of the East is really. I think the top of the East, and I think that last year too, like if you look at what the Western Conference was last year, the Blazers were not a good team. The Blazers were not better than the Bucks last year. The Blazers were not better than the Sixers of last year. The Blazers were definitely not better than the Raptors of last year. There were probably 4 teams in the East better than the Blazers were last year, and the Blazers made the conference finals. So the West to me is a little bit overrated, top heavy, but but then the West, obviously the bottom half is so much better than the East because the East have teams like the Chicago Bulls and the New York Knicks who are absolute and utter garbage. So I think the bottom of the West is better, but if you're telling me the Denver Nuggets are better than the Boston Celtics, they're not. Like, the Utah Jazz
they might be.
I don't think the Utah Jazz are better than the Indiana Pacers. Like, straight up, I just don't think that that's the case. I don't think if you give me a 7, like, that's kind of why I was kind of hoping that we get one.
I mean, this year. They were before TJ Warren started taking steroids.
Okay, but like TJ Warren's going off. What's his name? Donovan Mitchell went off for 57. It's just like, you know what I mean? Like, I truly think that the middle of the West, Denver doesn't scare me worth a damn. Utah doesn't scare me. The Rockets, I think, are overrated, and now, of course, Russ being out kind of hurts it a little bit. But I definitely think the Rockets are an overrated team. Like,
the Rockets are overrated?
I think the Rockets are overrated. I don't think they're as scary as people. And here's the thing, Jeff Green, I think, is going off right now. So, like, yeah, sure, if you're relying on Jeff Green to be the best player on the court, okay. But like, I don't know. Has Eric Gordon been good for the last 2 years? I don't know.
Westbrook is playing
about...
some of the best, most efficient basketball of his, or he
Sure,
was before.
I love Russ. I mean, he's hurt right now, but I love Russ. I'm a true Russ fan. Having said that,
Oh boy.
have we talked about players being bad on the defensive end and not being able to shoot threes on this pod? Have we mentioned something like that earlier?
Yes. Yeah. So Westbrook is one of those players that I feel like he's simultaneously overrated and underrated at the same time.
Oh, I agree with that. I think that's a great way of putting it. And I love Russ. Like, I'm actually a Russ believer. You're not going to catch me slandering Russ until people start talking about him like he's better than James Harden. Well, I guess for moments in this season, he's kind of looked like it. But, I'm a fan of the Rockets, and I think this sort of small ball is kind of cool. But I think I think that teams in the East would be better, maybe not even better equipped, because I think there are definitely teams in the West that can do it. But I think you can kind of scheme for it. It kind of feels gimmicky. And it can work, but I definitely think that it's like also something that can just be completely schemed out, and you just like, okay,
as has been proven.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I would love to see what the Blazers would do in a 7-game series. Like, I feel like Nurk would just be like, all right, every single rebound is mine. Cool. And just sort of completely dominate. So I don't know. I think the West is a little bit overrated, the top of the West at least. The bottom of the West still much better than the bottom of the East, because, I mean, the bottom of the East is just a disaster.
Oh, absolutely. It's embarrassing. I don't know though. I don't think the East will ever be better than the West. It's been that way for so long, and I think I don't know that I even agree with you that I think the West is better than these top to bottom. Actually, I don't.
Interesting. To me, if you actually gave it to me last year, if you told me the Portland Trailblazers would have beat any of the top 4 teams in the East last year, I would have been like, are you on drugs? Like, what part of their game? Like, the Blazers were very similar to the Raptors when the Raptors made the conference finals, which is like, okay, congrats, you made it, but the conference being bad is kind of why you made it, as opposed to you being great. And that's definitely how I thought of last year's Blazers team, who were better than this year's Blazers team, because they kind of got rid of everybody after making the conference finals, which is strange. But I think part of why the East is never going to be as good as the West is, for one, yes, a lot of the free agent destinations are on the West, but also just like the East just has some terribly run organizations. Like, it's very much like half of the East is just the Kings.
New York.
Yeah, the half of the East is like, yeah, it's exactly like what are the Knicks? Like, why?
The worst to run organization in any of all sports, in all the sports ever.
Yeah, probably.
All right. I just want to get, before I let you go, I do want to get your NBA awards predictions.
Oh, okay. MVP is Giannis.
Obviously.
Coach of the Year is Nick Nurse.
Okay, so we're not even going to try to be objective. Okay, go ahead.
That's the thing. No, I think it's the objective answer though. I'm not saying it as a fan. Like, if I were saying this as a fan, I'd be like, MVP is Kyle Lowry, Coach of the Year is Kyle Lowry, MIP is Kyle Lowry, Sixth Man is Kyle Lowry. Like, it's just Kyle Lowry all up and down.
There is no timeline in which Kyle Lowry wins MVP.
I'm telling you, my ballot, if I were being biased right now, would be Kyle Lowry as Coach of the Year, as Sixth Man of the Year. I don't care if he's never come off the bench. I'm talking like MVP, MIP, like everything. Kyle Lowry is all across my ballot. But in all honesty, I do think it's Nick Nurse. A lot of people are talking about Bud, and they're talking about, just like a surprise team and how many games they won, and they're talking about Billy Donovan for being the surprise team when everyone thought they would be bad. And I'm like, okay, but the Raptors are both a winning team. They have the second best record in the league, right, and they're also a surprise team. So they kind of hit on both what you're congratulating Bud and Billy Donovan for.
Right. No, you can make a legitimate argument.
Perfect. They're like, maybe I sound biased. Maybe this is like kind of like Raptors. I don't think there's an argument for like anyone else right now. And I think Nate McMillan's kind of being overlooked if you're going to have a conversation. I think it's flat out Nick Nurse. To me, it's like, okay, Bud has been great. Yes. He also has the MVP. And the Raptors are not getting any awards. Like, when you look up and down, like, they're not being rewarded for this team, which is another whole beef that I have. They have the second best record, better than the Lakers, better, like the second best record in the league, and they're not going to have awards, and you're telling me Nick Nurse is still not the coach of the year? That doesn't make any sense to me. And everyone thought that they would be bad this year. Like, people thought that they were going to miss the playoffs, which to me is also like, that to me is like people who just don't pay attention to the Raptors. Like, it's like, okay, if you thought that they were going to miss the playoffs, you've never watched a Raptors game in your life.
Yeah,
so,
no, that was crazy.
Even like the people who thought they were going to be 6-7 seeds, I'm like, you just didn't watch the Raptors. Like, there's been no iteration of this Kyle Lowry-led team that was that. Like, what are you basing that off of?
You don't think there's a legitimate argument for Billy Donovan, though?
I think the legitimate argument for Billy Donovan is stronger for Nick Nurse. Like, this idea of, like, there's a prize-win team. Everyone thought that they would be bad. Yada, yada, yada. Chris Paul, da-da-da. I think that can all be translated to what the Raptors did, and the Raptors did it at a much higher rate. Like, the Raptors, over an 82-game season, won 60 games, right? Like, it's a better rate that they did it at than the Thunder. They won more games. They were better offensively. They were better defensively. They were just the better team. And so, to me, that's the reason why I think Billy Donovan should be in the conversation, sure, but I don't think that his argument is stronger than Nick Nurse's.
Okay, fair enough. What about MIP?
MIP, that's a good one. I don't know, because I hate this award. I just feel like, okay, I don't, TJ Warren bubble MIP. Who would be MIP? I don't know. Who would be your MIP? I can't think.
It's definitely Bam Adebayo.
Really? Here's my thing about Bam Adebayo. I thought he was great last season. So, like, I don't know that, like, is it because they have Jimmy? So. Is it because they have Jimmy, so they're a better team now, and that's why we're giving it to him?
I mean, I have deeper issues with that award in general, because I think Danny Granger should have won it like 3 times in a row back in the day. And I don't know.
Danny Green most, like, what's the
No, Danny Granger. I said Danny Granger.
Oh, Danny Granger. I heard Danny Green. I was like, is Danny
Green?
No,
Danny Granger.
Okay. Yes, fair enough. Okay.
But yeah, there seems to be this unwritten rule that you only win that award once, which I strongly disagree with.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I definitely think you can improve again. And I also have an issue with it. Like, you never see it being, like, great players to, like, even greater players. Like, I would have argued that Pascal Siakam, I thought, was the MIP last year. But, like, Giannis had a good case for being MIP last year, despite, like, he was, like, great. And then he became, like, holy shit, this guy is otherworldly.
Yeah, that's the other unwritten rule. You can't already be a superstar that makes another leap.
You know? And Pascal Siakam, I think, to start the year could have really had an argument. Honestly, like, Jason Tatum would be a fine argument to me. Like, he's been great this year. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a bigger role, and he's really stepped into it. I don't know. Like, Jaylen Brown's been great this year as well. I don't know. That's like a weird one to me, because, like, I don't really know. I don't care who you give it to. What's next? What's another one? 6th man of the year?
Yes, 6th man.
Dennis Schroeder? Or maybe like a Clippers bench player? You know, if you want to,
I feel like the entire Clippers bench should just be
the Clippers bench could. Okay, if the Clippers bench is disqualified, then we can give it to Dennis Schroeder.
I would probably agree with that one. Okay. And almost, do you disagree with me? That it almost seems unfair to give it to a Clippers player, one of the Clippers bench players.
No, but I'm also like, Lou Will's had it a million years. Yeah, you know, give it to Montrez.
Really?
Why not? He's been great.
I mean, yes, for sure. No, absolutely. It wouldn't be like a ripoff if he won it, for sure. It just seems like their bench is unfair.
That's part of why that's part of it, right? It's like having an unfair bench. Okay, that's part of it, right? Like, the Raptors had an unfair bench last year, and the year before, like, actually last year was bad. The year before that, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's part of it. And I, thought that they should have won one then, and yeah. But yeah, I'd give it to Montrez. I'd do that. They've been good.
Fair enough. Is there another one? Is that it?
I think executive of the year, I'd give it to Masai.
Again, so the objectivity just pours out of you.
Hey, I think he deserved. I thought he deserved it last year. How do you get Kawhi Leonard to win a championship and you lose to the team that you beat?
I don't know how anyone other than Rob Pelinka could win executive of the year, but that's.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I'm giving it. You know what? If the Raptors beat the Lakers in the finals, it's on Masai.
Yeah. I don't know. That's kind of reaching. But man, it was really great having you on. I thank you so much for
thank you for having me on.
For doing my pod. I hope maybe to have you on again in the future.
Thank you. This was fun.
Did you want to tell people where to find you online or anything to plug?
Dishes and Dimes. Oh, you can find me on Twitter at _ what is it? Nope name until I get a name.
Nope name. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and the Dishes and Dimes podcast.
Yes.
All right. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Baddest Ballers podcast. Please feel free to support whatever you can at patreon.com/baddestballers and also check out our YouTube channel.